The story of a woman who, after her husband's betrayal and a difficult relationship with her children, is looking for peace and a new meaning in life. In the suburbs of Springfield, Illinois, lived the Griffin family. Thomas Griffin worked as a manager for a large company that supplied equipment for hospitals. His wife, Sarah, was a housewife and took care of the children and household chores. They had been together for over 20 years, raising 2 children, a son, Alex, who was 17, and a daughter, Lily, who had just graduated from high school. Their life seemed stable and calm from the outside. For the past 2 years, Thomas had been traveling a lot. His work required traveling to other cities, meeting with clients, and sometimes even attending medical exhibitions. Sarah didn't suspect anything strange. She trusted her husband and always accepted his explanations. She was focused on the house, the children, the garden, and volunteering at the local church. Everything changed when Sarah accidentally saw someone else's woman's earring in the glove compartment of their family SUV. She didn't pay much attention to it at first, thinking that it could have been Lily's or Alex's friend's thing. But the uneasy feeling did not leave her. She began to monitor Thomas's behavior more closely. His phone was always on silent mode, and he often went to another room to talk. He became more withdrawn and often stayed late at work or came home later than usual. Gradually, Sarah began to ask him careful questions, to which Thomas always answered confidently and without emotion. He said that he had a lot of work to do, that one of his clients had called him to another city, that he had to deal with force majeure. However, there were sometimes inconsistencies in his explanations. Once he said that he was going to Chicago, and Sarah accidentally saw a message on his laptop that indicated a trip to Indianapolis. Meanwhile, Alex and Lily noticed everything. They had both seen their father bring a woman home several times when their mother was away. It was a young woman named Melissa. She worked for one of the companies that Thomas worked with. Alex saw her get out of Thomas's car on Saturday afternoons while Sarah was at a yoga class. Lily had seen their father spend time with her in the backyard while their mother went to the store. Both children knew something was wrong, but they kept quiet. They didn't want to break up the family. They didn't want to see their mother upset, and they were afraid of conflict. Alex and Lily began to cover for their father. When Sarah asked why their father was late, Alex would say that their father was coming to pick him up from school. Lily said that they had been to the store together. They quickly learned to say things that sounded plausible and coordinated their answers with each other. Thomas could see that the children knew the truth, but he didn't tell them anything. He knew that the children's silence was playing into his hands. Sarah continued to notice small details that did not add up to a logical picture. A photograph that had disappeared from the shelf. A cup of lipstick in the sink. Hair on the headrest in the car. She began to suspect that her husband was unfaithful to her, but she had no proof. She turned to Alex and Lily with questions, but they always answered confidently and calmly. Their lies were so convincing that Sarah began to think that she was simply going crazy. Sarah decided that she could no longer ignore her suspicions. She turned to her friend for a recommendation for a private investigator. She did not say directly what she was looking for, only mentioned her lost trust and her need for the truth. The detective's name was George Campbell, and he had worked with private clients for over 15 years. Sarah met with him in an office near the city center and explained the situation. She said she wasn't sure about the betrayal, but she wanted to know the truth because the feeling of being lied to had become unbearable. The detective began to follow Thomas. A few days later, George gave Sarah the first results. He took pictures of Thomas spending the evening in a restaurant with Melissa, then they went to the hotel together. The next day, photos were taken of Thomas leaving the hotel room with the same woman. Sarah had no doubts. She did not show these photos to her children and did not immediately express her emotions. She silently digested everything for several days. Her inner state was broken. Alex and Lily continued to support their father. They saw how their mother became quieter. How she sometimes stood in the kitchen for a long time, doing nothing. They began to feel guilty, but they were already too deeply involved in the situation. Alex once tried to talk to his father and said that all this was wrong, that his mother was changing before his eyes. But Thomas only replied that everything was under control, that they were adults and would decide everything between themselves. He asked his son not to interfere. Sarah began to plan her actions. She consulted a lawyer and learned about the possibilities of divorce. The lawyer told her what her rights were, how the property would be divided, and how to ensure financial stability in case Thomas objected or made the process difficult. Sarah began to collect documents, financial statements, copies of bills and contracts. She did not want to be vulnerable. She decided not to tell Thomas anything until she was completely ready. Within a few weeks, Sarah knew almost everything. She had the full detective report, the chronology of the meetings, the photos, the evidence. She had gathered all the necessary documents to file for divorce. But before taking the final step, she wanted to know why the children so confidently denied her suspicions. She spent the evening with each of them separately. With Lily, she sat in the backyard, with Alex, in the kitchen. She did not press, did not accuse, did not raise her voice. She simply listened. But neither of the children confessed. They continued to cover for their father, although less convincingly than before. Sarah knew that the children knew. She saw it in Alex's eyes when he looked down, and in Lily's voice, which trembled when she said she hadn't seen anything. She understood that Thomas had taken advantage of the children's trust, made them hide the truth, and that they themselves didn't know how to get out of this circle. On Sunday, Sarah got up early and made breakfast, as usual. She set the table, put the plates, put out the coffee. She behaved calmly and habitually. When everyone gathered in the kitchen, she said that she would be out for a short time today. She went to her lawyer and signed the documents. That same evening, she handed Thomas a copy of the documents. He was shocked. He hadn't expected Sarah to go to such a step. He tried to explain, saying that it could still be fixed, that it had been a mistake. But Sarah didn't answer. She had already decided everything. Alex and Lily were stunned. They didn't think it would go this far. They started arguing with each other, blaming each other for not stopping their father, for not telling their mother sooner. They both felt responsible for what had happened, although they understood that Thomas had made the choice. After the divorce papers were served, the atmosphere in the Griffin house changed dramatically. Thomas packed up and moved into a rented apartment nearby. He tried to maintain contact with his children, but their responses became short and reserved. Alex and Lily were no longer the same. Their relationship with their father had cooled, although they did not outwardly show aggression or hatred. They simply closed themselves off. Despite the pain and resentment, Sarah did not allow herself to despair. She knew that life was not over. She focused completely on herself and her children. She began to engage in charitable activities more actively, joined several local initiatives, and even started online accounting courses. She decided to return to the job she had left before Alex was born. It was hard on her, but she kept going. Despite her father's initial support, the children began to feel the real effects of the situation. Alex became less active in school, missed soccer practice, and stopped participating in club activities. He spent a lot of time in his room, sitting silently at his computer or just lying there, staring at the ceiling. Lily, who had planned to go to college in another state, put off her decision. She stayed home for a year to be closer to her mother. She took a break and got a job at a local pharmacy. One evening, Lily went to her mother and, unable to bear it, confessed that she had known about the betrayal long before it all became public. She said she was ashamed of it and didn't know why she hadn't told the truth. Sarah didn't scold her. She just looked at her daughter and hugged her. She understood that the situation was too difficult for a young girl. A few days later, Alex also admitted that he had covered up for his father. He said that he did not want to see the family fall apart. He did not want to see his mother sad. He thought that if everyone kept quiet, everything would remain as it was. Sarah didn't get angry at her children. She knew they weren't to blame. Her decision to divorce hadn't changed, but she felt a sense of peace that the truth had finally come out. She no longer doubted her understanding of events. She realized that betrayals don't just happen in marriages, but also in the trust between parents and children when they are forced to keep quiet. Meanwhile, Thomas was trying to get his new life together. His relationship with Melissa didn't last long. She wasn't ready for a serious commitment, and after a few months they broke up. He began spending his evenings alone, looking at old family photos, realizing what he had lost. His attempts to regain his children's trust were futile. Alex would respond to his messages every other day or not at all. Lily said she wasn't ready to see him because she hadn't forgiven him yet. The trial went without any unnecessary conflict. Sarah filed papers, citing infidelity as the reason. Thomas didn't object. The property was divided by agreement. Sarah got the house, and Thomas got a share of the bank accounts and some personal belongings. Sarah kept the car and the right to child support for Alex, a minor. The court made a decision quickly, as both parties did not delay the process. After the divorce, Sarah felt her life begin to take shape anew. She arranged the house in a new way, rearranged the furniture, painted the walls, got rid of things that reminded her of the past. She did not seek to erase the memories, but wanted to give herself a chance to live without pain. Alex and Lily supported her. Their silent complicity turned into open support. After the divorce, the lives of each family member began to move in a new direction. Although this movement was not easy, Sarah focused on her studies. Online accounting courses required time and effort. She sat at her laptop every night, jotting down deadlines, solving problems, studying examples of reports. This became a new goal for her, a way to displace emotional pain through mental activity. She wanted to become independent not only morally, but also financially. During the day, she did housework and volunteered at a local soup kitchen for the homeless. It was important for her to feel that she was needed, that her efforts were making a difference. In communication with others, she did not talk about the divorce, did not complain, did not voice her pain. She kept everything to herself, but her new acquaintances felt that something deep was hidden behind her calmness. Alex, who had previously been an active teenager, became more and more withdrawn. He did not want to communicate with classmates, did not attend school events, did not even celebrate his birthday, although before he always looked forward to this day. At home, he often sat in a dark room, sometimes listening to music, sometimes just lying in bed. Sarah tried to talk to him, offered to go for walks or trips together, but he almost always refused. He felt guilty for his part in hiding the truth. It seemed to him that he had pushed his mother into depression, although logically he understood that the fault lay with his father.
But the teenage brain does not always separate emotions and facts.
He lived in the shadow of his choice, constantly analyzing whether he could have changed something if he had told the
truth then.
One day he wrote his father a long message in which he expressed everything he kept inside: disappointment, anger, pain, and loss of trust. Thomas replied briefly, trying to justify himself, but Alex did not open any more of his messages. Meanwhile, Lily began to help her mother more. She took on some of the household duties, paid the bills, and supervised household chores. Working at the pharmacy, she gained experience, interacted with customers, and learned about the internal processes.
She began to think about going to pharmacy school. Now her motivation was not only to get an
education, but also to gain stability, to have a profession that would allow her to not depend
on anyone.
She also went through a stage of guilt, but her defense mechanism was action.
She did not allow herself to stop or get emotional.
She knew that her mother was counting on her.
And
although Sarah never directly demanded it, Lily felt the need to be strong. Thomas, meanwhile, continued to live in his apartment. He tried several times to establish communication with his children, sending them money to their accounts, offering to meet.
But the responses were brief or non-existent.
He gradually realized that his act had broken not only the marriage, but also the foundations of trust between him and his children. His job remained stable, but his morale was deteriorating. He started drinking alcohol in the evening, although he had never done so before.
He did not seek new relationships, did not go to bars or clubs.
His everyday life became monotonous: work, the journey home, dinner alone, TV, the silence of the night. One day, in late November, Thomas came to the house to wish the children a happy
Thanksgiving.
He left the gifts by the door and left without ringing the bell.
Sarah found the
packages, put them on the table, and told the children that they were from their father.
Alex turned away and left the room. Lily looked at the box but did not open it. The gifts remained unwrapped. After Thanksgiving, the atmosphere in the house remained tense but silent. No one talked
about the gifts that Thomas had left. They just sat in the corner of the room, gathering dust. Sarah did not stress about them, did not force the children to open the boxes.
She understood that these things would not change anything and that the emotional distance
between the children and their father could not be overcome by money or surprises. In December, Sarah passed an internal test at the company and was offered full-time
employment.
This was a big victory for her.
She had a small celebration for herself. She bought a cake, ordered pizza, and set the table. Alex and Lily supported her, though they
were restrained in their emotions. That evening, the three of them sat together for the first time in a long time, without the burden of silence, without hot topics.
They just had dinner.
They just silently supported each other with their presence.
Sarah decided that there would be no trips, no loud celebrations, no invited guests for Christmas.
She told the children that she wanted peace.
They didn't object.
The three of
them stayed home, watched a movie, ate homemade cookies, and simply spent the evening in silence.
It was snowing outside, the lights on the neighboring houses twinkled, and their house was a place of minimalism and internal order built on the efforts of recovery.
In early January, Alex began preparing for admission.
He applied to 2 colleges, attended
online meetings, and talked to teachers. Lily helped him prepare for interviews, gave advice,
and checked his motivation letters. Sarah was glad that despite the difficulties, her son had
found the strength to return to his plans for the future. Lily also applied to a pharmacy college in their city.
She did not want to postpone her education any longer. After a year of break, she felt ready to return to school.
Her goal was stability, not prestige or prestige.
She wanted a profession that would allow her to help
people and be independent.
Sarah continued to work, manage household chores, and find time for herself.
She began to
go on weekly walks in the park, sometimes visited a bookstore, and took out books on
psychology and self-development.
She did not seek a quick cure, but accepted the slow pace of growth. She understood that the pain did not disappear suddenly, but over time its
impact weakened.
Thomas, on the other hand, became increasingly aware of the scale of what he had lost.
His life became a sequence of identical days. Morning office, evening apartment.
Sometimes he woke up at night with thoughts about his family, looking through old
correspondence, photos from trips, holidays. He did not look for new acquaintances. He did not start new relationships.
His greatest loss was not marriage, but the loss of contact with
his children.
He wrote several more letters, emotional, honest, without excuses. In them, he did not ask for forgiveness directly, did not promise changes, he simply described his condition and
thanked Sarah for the years together.
He left one of the letters at the door of the house at night, attaching a photo from their first trip to Arizona to it, when Lily was only 5.
Sarah found it in the morning.
She read the letter, but did not react. She did not burn it or hide it. She put it in a drawer where she put important documents.
The following spring brought new changes.
The snow had melted, the days were longer, and the heaviness of winter's shadows had lifted from the air.
There was still not much laughter
or joy in Sarah's house, but there was a lightness.
What had once been a struggle, getting
up in the morning, planning the day, smiling at passers-by, had now become commonplace.
Sarah had been promoted. She was no longer just an accounting assistant, she now
managed several small business accounts and kept internal records.
Her colleagues respected her for her accuracy and restraint.
She didn't talk about her personal life, but she had the look in her eyes of someone who had been through something difficult and not
broken.
Alex received his acceptance letter to college. He showed no emotion, but Sarah noticed how long he held the letter in his hands, considering every detail.
He began preparing to move into the dorm, buying things, checking in with future classmates.
This was the first real step into a new life, one he chose himself, without the influence of his father. Lily enrolled in college and began her classes.
She went to couples classes every day,
studied pharmacology, biology, and did a basic internship at a local hospital.
Her schedule was hectic, but she didn't complain. Her determination impressed even her teachers.
During those same months, Sarah allowed herself to open up to someone outside of her for
the first time.
She met a man at a charity event where she was volunteering. His name was
David, and he worked at the municipal library.
He was reserved, attentive, and didn't ask
unnecessary questions.
They met a few times by chance, and later he invited her for coffee. Sarah agreed without emotional outbursts, simply, calmly, without expectations.
She didn't
plan a new relationship, but it was nice to talk to someone who wasn't connected to her pain. Meanwhile, Thomas was going through a deep internal crisis. His attempts to reconnect with his children remained unanswered.
The letters he wrote remained read but not discussed.
He realized that the only way to rebuild trust, at least partially, was to be there without pressure. He began to come to football games where Alex played, standing on the sidelines
and not attracting attention.
One day he saw Lily leaving the training building. She saw him, but only nodded and walked on. He accepted this coldness. It was his choice, and these were the consequences.
But at the
same time, he did not disappear, did not turn away completely. He helped pay for Alex's Education sent Lily a monthly allowance, even though she did not ask for it. He did not write, did not call, just supported her from a distance, as best he could. He could only hope that in time his presence would become acceptable. In April, Sarah, Alex, and Lily went to a small town for 2 days, the first time they had left home together in the last year. It was not a vacation. They simply rented a small house by the lake, cooked breakfasts together, walked along the shore, read books. There were no deep conversations. There were no mentions of Thomas. But there was a silence that no longer seemed like a burden. It became a symbol of a new stability, calm, quiet, simple. After the trip to the lake, a new, unspoken closeness was established between Sarah, Alex, and Lily. They no longer talked about the past, did not try to understand why what had happened. They simply lived day by day, without big words and without unnecessary explanations. Each had their own schedule, their own tasks, their own goals. But they sometimes spent the evenings together, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Sarah continued to communicate with David. They saw each other rarely, because they were both busy, but even short meetings brought her something new, a lightness that she had long lost. For the first time in a long time, she did not feel guilty for smiling. She didn't tell her children about him, she didn't hide him, she didn't advertise him. She just let herself be alive. Alex graduated from high school. At the graduation ceremony, Sarah and Lily were sitting in the front row, applauding, filming. Thomas was in the hall, but further away, closer to the exit. He didn't come over. He didn't want to invade their space. He just watched. He saw his son standing on stage, accepting his diploma, shaking the director's hand. He saw Sarah applauding and Lily smiling. He saw them taking pictures after the ceremony, Lily hugging her brother, Sarah smoothing his jacket. And he realized that he wasn't there. He got in the car and drove home. Without a word, without trying to get close. At that moment, he finally accepted that some things never come back. That summer, Alex worked part-time at a computer repair shop, earning money for his studies and buying himself things to move into a dorm. He stopped avoiding people, started hanging out with his peers, and even invited a few friends over to his house. Sarah was surprised to see a living room full of young boys laughing and playing a board game. Her son was starting to grow up not only on the outside but also on the inside. Lily spent the summer doing an internship at a hospital pharmacy. She learned how to work with prescriptions, understand dosages, and advise patients. And although it was just the beginning, for the first time she felt that her work had value. She would come home tired but with a sense of accomplishment. During this time, Sarah continued to work and gradually rebuild her inner life. She began to take more care of herself, read in the morning, go to the movies alone, cook new dishes. Her life was no longer empty. It was not perfect, but it became full of meaning. In August, Alex packed his bags and left for his college. Sarah and Lily saw him off. The farewell was discreet but emotional. When the car started, Lily held her mother's hand. They returned home together. And although one room in the house remained empty, it no longer seemed like a loss. Autumn came quickly. The leaves in the park near Sarah's house began to change colors. Yellow, brown, red, as if nature itself was telling the story of changes. The house was empty. Alex was in college, Lily spent most of her time in classes and internships. Sarah got up every morning, went to work, and in the evenings read or walked. Her life became clear, stable, understandable. And she was grateful for it. One evening she received a message from David. He wrote that he was moving to another city, where he had been offered a position as head of a department in the university library. They met for the last time, without promises, without emotional farewells. They simply thanked each other for the months when there was a person nearby who did not demand anything extra. Meanwhile, Lily began to linger more often after the couples. Sarah thought this was due to practice, but one evening she happened to see her daughter in a cafe with her husband. They were sitting close, smiling, and Sarah immediately recognized Thomas in him. Horror. Heart froze. She did not go over, did not call. She simply stood behind the glass and watched her daughter talk calmly to someone whom she had not even been able to listen to until recently. The next day Sarah spoke to Lily. The conversation was short. Lily confessed that she had been talking to her father for months. She hadn't said it before because she didn't want to hurt him. But she didn't want to live in internal conflict anymore. She let go of her anger and decided to give him a chance, not as Sarah's husband, but as her father. Sarah didn't say anything. She just nodded and left the room. She needed to process it alone. A week later, on Sunday, the doorbell rang. Sarah answered. Thomas was standing on the doorstep. He was holding an old box, the same one he had left by the door on Thanksgiving. It was still unopened. Thomas put the box on the porch and said that it contained something important, not things, not gifts, but something she needed to see. Sarah opened the box after he had left. Inside she found dozens of envelopes. Each one was dated. These were the letters that Thomas had written every week for the entire year. After the divorce, he hadn't sent them, he had just written them. Each one contained thoughts, memories, descriptions of his regrets, of how he saw his mistakes, of how he was trying to understand what they had all lost. Sarah read them all evening, one by one. Without tears, without tantrums. Just reading. And in each line she saw a person who had not justified herself but had accepted responsibility. She hadn't called him. She hadn't written. But the next week, when Lily had gone on a date, and the house was empty, she left the house and went to the same cafe where she had seen them. She sat at the same table and ordered tea. Then she took out one of the letters and left it on the table. A few minutes later, Thomas entered the establishment. He saw her. He froze. She didn't nod, she didn't smile. She just sat. He walked over and sat down. The story didn't have a happy ending, but it did have an unexpected continuation.